Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, dead slaves, serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And let's go to Greece because Greece is in collapse again in negotiations for yet another bailout and going to undertake even more crushing austerity, as it turns out. So let's look at the big picture. So we have collapse of Greece began back in 2007, and by 2010, Greece got its first bailout of $124 billion, and in 2011 got another bailout of $147 billion, and now they're talking about a third bailout of $96 billion. And since 2007, the Greek economy has contracted by at least 25%. A quarter of all companies in Greece have closed, and wages are down 38%, and pensions cut in half, and unemployment anywhere from 25 to 70%, depending. The 70% being youth unemployment. So now we have a situation where the Greek government is accepting more austerity and more pension and income tax reforms, and the IMF and the Eurozone and Greece are locked in negotiations again, and and it comes at a bad time as well, because a new study came out. Although we've seen these kind of figures before, that of the previous 216 billion euros in bailouts that Greece has gotten, only 5%, 9.7 billion, actually went into the country of Greece. The other percentage, 95% of it, went to pay creditors and banks and lenders, and we shouldn't be surprised there. Figured 87 billion euros in debt repayment, 9 billion euros that went back to the IMF, 52 billion euros that went to interest payments alone. 52 billion in interest payments alone. How do they expect Greece to ever get out of this when they're paying 52 billion in interest payments? 37 billion euros in bank recapitalization. So there's 40 billion that just went right back to the banks who caused a lot of these problems in the first place. And then 29 billion in investor incentives, so subsidies and handouts to try and get people to go back in Greece and try and operate in the Greek economic system. So now we have the Tsipras government, which was elected a year or so ago, and of course they came in with promises of overturning austerity, renegotiating bailout terms, addressing corruption and tax evasion, and here we find them selling out. So I hate to be right. I did a video back in February 2015 when Tsipras first came into power, and I figured sooner or later they would probably end up being crushed and having to toe the line, and the depression in Greece would continue. And unfortunately, I turned out to be right in my perspective. And so now we have an amazing array of new tax increases affecting things in everyday life, including a new value-added tax increase to 25%, and then new spending limits, new austerity, new pension cuts. And then, of course, the bottom line, the fire sale, the continuing sale of state assets to investors. And the investors will include those who've managed to survive the carnage in Greece. Those are probably who have been benefiting from a corrupt economy for a long time. And then, like I say, foreign investors. And we've seen this before in the collapse of the Soviet Union and the overturning of state enterprises in both the Soviet Union and Ukraine and Russia. Oligarchs were poised to cash in on this and got a lot of assets for pennies on the dollar. And so we're seeing the same kind of economic rape going on in Greece, and has been going on for a number of years now. And so now we have this this deadlock between the ECB, the EU, and IMF, and the IMF is essentially saying they don't want to really renegotiate anything. The EU wants to try and maybe give some debt relief, and then Germany is worried about setting any examples of debt relief so that it will encourage other countries to push for big haircuts and debt relief. So that's a lot of the fear here. They know something very drastic needs to change in the handling of Greece, but they don't dare do it because it will set an example that a lot of other European countries that are in economic trouble might resort to. And then on top of everything else that Greece has a problem with now, of course, they've got 1.2 million Syrians, Afghans, and Iraqis that have moved through Greece, and 53,000 refugees are still in limbo in Greece right now. And I understand things have been going relatively well considering this influx, but interesting that Greece finds itself at this refugee crossroads in this deal between the Eurozone and Turkey as well, in spite of having all these other problems weighing in on their society. And so we have a crisis coming up, and that's why the negotiations are so heated, because in June and July, $11 billion in repayments are due from Greece, and they just do not have the money. And we also found out this last month from a WikiLeaks that the IMF expects this Greek emergency, and that they will have no recovery in Greece for decades. And in fact, it was odd to find out that this third bailout will have debt payments pushed out to 2059. How crazy is that we live in a situation now where they're trying to predict and set up some sort of a debt repayment plan that goes out to another 40, 50 years from now. Completely absurd. But the third bailout will include 86 billion euros in total bailout. 50 billion will go to a trust fund to help with privatizing. It will be funded by privatizing assets, hopefully. $7.1 billion in a bridge loan just to get them through this immediate crisis, and then supposedly another 35 billion euros in EU funding for growth and new jobs. So good luck with that. But what a situation. So all I can say is that all along the problem has been a debt problem with Greece, and they've piled on more debt, and they're going to pile on more debt on top of that, and somehow through more and more debt piled on Greece, something's supposed to turn around at some point and magically fix. So here we go again, throwing money into the Greece money hole. Hopefully there'll be some more serious discussions of a possible Greek exit. And certainly a lot of the Eurozone, to a certain extent, has had a lot of time to reduce their exposure to Greece debt. But nonetheless, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure rhymes. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.